Hi and welcome to this week's 10x Leadership video. Thank you very much for tuning in. We are still on the Modern Leadership series, and this week it's episode 42 and it's about systems thinking. So just a quick reminder for those that this is the first video you've seen. Back in episode 35 I was talking about 3 parts of modern leadership: adaptability, leveraging technology and inclusivity, all to make sure that as leaders we can keep pace with the changes and the rapid pace of change that we've got in the modern world. We covered off adaptability in episodes 31, 36 and 37. We covered off leveraging technology. There were 2 parts to that. So the first part we covered off in episodes 38 to 41, and what we're going to be covering today is systems thinking. Okay, let's get into it. So in order to understand systems thinking, I just wanted to start off with what traditional thinking looks like. So traditional thinking is where leaders think that X happens, whatever X happens to be, and then there's a sort of direct cause and effect, and as a result of doing it, of X happening, you do Y, and it's very linear. And it's all very simple, and it's easy, and you just make a decision and it's fixed. The reality of course of life is that it's much more complex. So in reality, instead of it being a direct linear connection between the thing happening and an outcome or a fix, it's more likely that you're part of a system, that you're part of a series of interconnecting elements that work together to make something happen. And of course the thing with that is, if any one element of that breaks, then the whole thing stops working. So we need to think of work and activities and life much more as a series of interconnected elements, rather than a direct isolated set of things that you can simply change one thing and then you fix another. And in reality, of course, it's even more complex than that. So we often operate in a sort of system where there are a series of interlocking parts, but that's part of a wider set. So you might be connected to another system that's connected to another system that's connected to yet another system that might feed back into the original system, and there might be feeds from somewhere else that are also dependencies to make that thing work. And if you think about virtually any aspect of your life, it's much more like that picture than the sort of traditional thinking, which is, as I say, very linear, very isolated, and there's only a couple of things you need to play with and everything gets fixed. So in essence, systems thinking is just simply an approach to problem solving that's got a number of different parts of a system that interact with each other. And as I say, if you just think about life, virtually everything's like that. And instead of looking at just items in isolation, systems thinkers look at the whole thing. They look at the relationships, they look at the connections between items and activities and tools and all sorts of things, and they think about the feedback loops and the broader environment, and they use all of that to make much more sensible decisions. And that's what in essence systems thinking is. It sounds very grand, but really it's quite simple. And I just want to give you a couple of examples. So Toyota, who famously have done Kaizen and lean principles and a load of other things that have significantly improved the performance, the quality of the production of motor vehicles. They don't look at a single item. They don't think, oh, there's a problem with that, there's just one thing we need to sort to fix it. They look at the whole production system and how it all functions efficiently together to make sure that any changes they make don't have a detrimental impact and has a positive impact, which is what they're after. And equally, if we look at healthcare, So healthcare, I was going to say in the UK, but it's across the world really. But if you think about government policy and how it's trying to tackle healthcare, it's not just doing it through the NHS. It's not just doing it by treating the symptoms of an individual's condition. It's trying to tackle it through a number of ways, which is, things like stopping smoking. It's encouraging people not to drink as much. It's trying to prevent diseases by encouraging, 5 fruit and veg a day. It's about reducing pollution. It's about addressing socioeconomic factors that, usually people with on poor incomes have poorer health. So helping people get into work, earn more money, stay in employment, that's all going to have a positive impact on their health. So, the government is looking at the whole system in order to try and fix it. And yes, it pumps lots of money into the NHS to fix that as well, but it also does all of those other things and probably a load of others as well to try and get to a systemic solution to the problem. So, why does it matter? Well, I've touched on it already, but really it's about the fact that modern organisations are, whilst they look like they're separate departments, they're really just part of an interconnected system. And an interconnected system where, employees, customers, suppliers, they're constantly influencing each other. So again, if we think we're doing something in isolation, then, I don't know, we must have our head in the sand. Customers are constantly asking for more, expecting more, the world keeps turning, expectations get higher, technology moves on, suppliers are coming up with new ways of working, etc., etc. Employees want to provide a better service. All of that influences what happens and how we interact with, in this case, employees, customers and suppliers. Technology, as I've mentioned in lots of previous videos, is just moving at a pace it's never moved before. And that can have significant impacts and significant changes on business models overnight. And we need to be able to keep up with that. But again, we need to understand that if we're going to be adopting technology, or we want to make a change somewhere in the system, what impact is that going to have? Is that going to have a positive impact, or is that going to lead to some unexpected consequences and we're going to be in a worse position than we thought we were going to be? And I suppose that's links to the third point there, which is, a change in a policy or an approach anywhere in the system can cause unintended issues elsewhere, unless we've thought about it and we've considered what those impacts might be. So just to sort of bring this to life, I just wanted to give you an example of a particular company. So I wanted to have a look at Tesla. Tesla could have just decided to build a car, but they didn't. I mean, they obviously did build a car. They built a whole load of cars. And in fact, I think the Model Y is the best-selling car in the world. But they realised that if they were going to build an electric car, then people were going to be concerned about range. And they were going to want to know that if they're going to buy an electric car, there's a way of charging it. So they didn't just build a car, they also built the supercharger network, because they understood that this was part of a wider system. Not only that, of course, and by the way, that is by far the best EV charging system in the world, and they invested millions and millions and millions of pounds to put that in place, because they knew that if they didn't, people wouldn't buy the cars. So that was a fantastic move, a good illustration of systems thinking, but it went further than that, because they also realised that if they started building lots of electric cars, they would need lots of batteries, and they needed to have control over the battery situation. So they created their own factories where they created their own batteries and created their own battery packs for their own cars. Again, because they knew that if they didn't, and demand was high for their cars, there would be no way they can keep up with demand. And not only that, they then created all the software that goes in the car and the automated driving and all of the over-the-air updates and all of the features that make a Tesla car as successful as it is. So they didn't rely on other people again. They recognised that that was a key part of the system, and they've made sure that they control that. And all of those things, and marketing and hundreds of other things that is part of their systems thinking approach, means that as at the time of recording, their market capitalisation is $1.3 trillion. So that's the 7th most valuable publicly traded company in the world. And just bear in mind that the company was only founded in 2003, and then Elon Musk started investing about a year after that, and then eventually took over. And the thing that I find absolutely staggering is, from taking a really innovative product and thinking about it in a systemic way and putting all the other elements in place, they've basically gone from nothing in 2003 to being worth more than the next 35 biggest automakers combined. Easy for me to say. I mean, that is absolutely staggering. They've, if they'd done it any other way, they probably would have failed. And in fact, doing it this way, they almost failed. Because they, at various points, they've almost run out of money. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's great, and I can see the benefits of having a systems thinking approach. But how do I go about it? So I just want to cover over the next couple of slides an approach that will help you work out, what the, as the name suggests, what the causal links are through a causal loop diagram. Now again, sounds all very grand, doesn't it? But it's really quite simple. So the trick here is looking at the sort of components and elements. So think of a trigger to start with, and then think, well, is that going to have a positive or a negative effect? Might have both, of course. And trace those through. And I'm going to do an example here using Tesla. So innovation was the thing that started driving Tesla. They wanted to build an electric vehicle and change the automotive industry, and they did that through innovation. That innovation created a positive effect on customer demand. So more and more customers wanted their products, and that meant that they got more revenue and more profit. So another positive link, and that positive link meant that they could have more money to invest in innovation, and they kept the cycle going. So there's an example of a sort of reinforcing loop, and all I've done there is I've taken the initial trigger and then thought, well, what impact did that have? Was it positive or negative? Mapped it, and then you go to the next step and you just keep repeating the process. Now, the example here and the one I'm going to do on the next slide are really simple, but in reality, you might have a massive whiteboard of all sorts of connections with all sorts of spider loops going all over the place. But again, what you're looking for is this sort of positive reinforcement loop. And if you can find those, that's what you want to keep building on, because that's going to keep building your business and keep improving your service and your outputs. I toyed with just whether keeping it like that, but actually there are some negative impacts as well. And at times Tesla has been so successful, it's struggled. So I just want to cover that bit as well. So customer demand at times has been so high that has had a negative impact on their production capacity. So they haven't been able to keep up with the demand from their customers. So a negative impact, the negative impact of that is that's had a negative impact on the brand, because people have wanted to buy the cars but couldn't buy them, or have had to wait a long time. And then they're not happy about that. So it has a negative impact. And of course, that negative brand reputation then can have a negative impact on customer demand. So you just keep tracing these things round until you see hopefully some positive loops that you can reinforce. And where you see negative loops, you at least understand what the potential pitfalls are of making a decision. And then you can make a conscious decision about whether that's still the thing you want to do, or whether you want to try a different option, because that might have a different outcome. And again, all you would do there is you would trace the different options out, work out the positives and negatives through a causal loop diagram, and if that comes out with a more positive outcome, you might go with the other option. I just want to cover off a second example here. So one that's a bit more relevant to leadership, I suppose. So let's imagine there's a boss in an organisation who decides to cut some costs. So they think there's too much money being spent. They need to rationalise a bit, and they just arbitrarily say, right, what we're going to do then is we're going to cut the training budget. So they think that's the right answer. It solves the problem, doesn't it? The leader hasn't got enough money, so they've cut the training budget. It's not going to have an impact straight away. That's okay. But if you follow it through and think about it in a systems thinking way, that training team budget reduction means obviously there's less training and there's less development for individuals. That means that over time employees will struggle to deliver their outcomes, because the thing that upskilled them and helped them understand what they should do and do that efficiently has been taken away. Now that has an impact on service potentially, and you could trace that route through, and you could work out what that means. There's a whole load of steps you could go through there to work out whether there's any positives in there, whether it's all negatives. But that's also going to have an impact on morale of people in the team, because if they can't do the job, or it's harder to do the job and they're getting frustrated, it's going to lower their morale. That's going to create higher turnover, so more people leaving the company or organisation. That then in turn is going to mean more recruitment. As we know, recruitment is expensive, so recruitment costs rise. And before you know it, what you've done is, through that decision to cut costs and then arbitrarily decide it's going to be training because that's an easy answer, without understanding the implications, all you've actually done is create a negative loop and created more costs in the business. And before you know it, you're in a negative spiral, and just, you're going to have to find some other ways of solving the problem. So instead of fixing it, you've actually created another problem for yourself. So, as I say, this being a systems thinker just allows you to consciously make decisions and understand what the likely implications are of a decision. It's not going to be perfect. It never is going to be, is it? There's so many variables. But doing this sort of causal loop diagram, even just informally on a bit of paper or a whiteboard, just gives you some information to make a more informed decision. So, I encourage you to be a systems thinker. This is about modern leadership. I think personally it's an essential skill for a modern leader. And that's because it will help you make better long-term decisions. So why is that important? Well, I see a lot of people spending a lot of time reacting to situations. And the problem with that is being busy looks quite good, but actually it's not very effective, not very productive. So the more you and your team are reacting to things, and the less time you've got for planning, the more likely it is you can have more reactive things happening. You're less likely to understand what's coming over the horizon. You'll be less prepared for it. You'll be a negative loop again, just constantly going down and down and down. Whereas if you concentrate on activities and decisions that solve problems and solve them for the long term, that gives you more time to focus on a whole range of other things, including planning, strategy, looking for things coming over the horizon, making sure you're prepared for them, looking at what your competitors are doing and working out how to beat them basically and be a better company or organisation. And employees will be much happier working in an organisation and a company where things feel like you're on top of them rather than constantly firefighting. So morale will be much better as well. Linked to that, having a systems thinking approach and considering the causal loop and the potential impacts, that will help you understand the ripple effect of any given decision. As I say, it won't be perfect. You can't anticipate everything, but it's much, much better than just thinking in isolation and just getting, right, we're just doing that. I think the other thing is it avoids short-term fixes, so the opposite of the first point. Again, I see lots of people doing short-term fixes, and it seems like the easy answer. And it is an easy answer, I suppose. You just, you fix the thing closest to you and think, well, I'll deal with the problem another day. But what it's not doing is it's not getting at the root cause problem. And we covered that in one of the other videos, the 5 whys. So if you haven't seen that, go and have a look. And if you just keep doing short-term fixes, they're all going to come back to bite you at some point. So you'd be much better investing your time and effort in both for you and your team and for your successors and whoever comes to lead the team in the future. You'd be much better off having a load of medium and long-term fixes in place, because it calms everything down, allows people time to think, process, operate, and, as I say, be more motivated. And it also encourages your team, if you're doing it, you're leading by example again, encourages your team to do strategic thinking and systems thinking. And before you know it, you're all doing it and you're all anticipating the problems, you're all understanding what the potential impacts are, and lots more of your decisions will be much better decisions, and you will have fewer unexpected consequences. So that's it. I think it's a really important skill as a modern leader. I hope you do as well. As ever, I'm interested in hearing how you get on with it, whether it's working for you. If you don't think it is, and you think, I'm talking a load of cobblers in this video, just let me know. Put a comment, give me the thumbs up, thumbs down, depending on how good or otherwise you think this video is. As ever, if you wouldn't mind subscribing, that would be really, really useful. It costs you nothing, but it really helps the channel, and it encourages me just to keep going. So we're on episode 42. I'm going to do at least 52, and then we'll see how it goes. And but hopefully there'll be enough interest for me to carry on doing these videos. If you think they're helpful, please share them with colleagues, friends, anyone who would benefit from seeing them. Great, thank you very much for watching. If you've got to this point, gold star coming in the post, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much.